Hi, and welcome to another GrafanaCon and another major release. So every year I talk about the next kind of major release at every GrafanaCon, and I don't want to make this any different, but it is quite different. I'm not on a GrafanaCon stage. I'm doing this from the comfort of my home. Uh, and let's get into it. I have a ton to talk about and show you. So let's jump to the kind of the agenda for today. I'm gonna talk a little bit, sort of quite quickly, go through the past year and see what we've done in all the minor releases, and then jump into the big kind of things that we have done in 7.0. With the new panel editor, the new kind of data model and pipeline that powers a lot of the new things in 7.0, like the transformation feature and the panel inspector. And I'm gonna end with a look at our new tracing story and feature. So a lot to talk about. It's not gonna be not gonna cover everything that's new in 7.0. So there's still lots to kind of dig into in the changelog and what's new articles, and we'll cover a lot more in the coming weeks as well, through blog posts and videos. But let's jump in and take a look at what we've been up to since last time. So last time I did a presentation like this was at GrafanaCon LA, and we just launched Grafana 6.0 there. Yeah, and you can see me looking pretty stupid in those glasses. Matt tricked me into coming out dressed like that with the GrafanaCon beach towel as a cape. Anyway, it was a fun conference, and we launched Grafana 6.0. But since then, we have actually done 7 minor releases, kind of a record for Grafana to do that many releases during a year, largely due to the fact that we're a lot bigger team now. And we did some cool things. I'm just going to highlight some of the things we did in those minor releases, not all. But we added a new panel, kind of building on our new panel architecture, and a new React-based panel architecture. We launched a new bar gauge panel, which looks pretty cool, as well as the stat panel that is going to be a replacement for the single stat panel. And this much more capable panel can actually do repeat itself in different layouts, supporting multiple series and fields, and has some other cool things like automatically adjusting the layout based on dimensions. We launched this feature called data links that allows you to add links to your data that you can actually interact with the graph. For example, click a data point or click a series, and then use the series name or labels or data point or data value in the link that you can then click on to go to another dashboard, go to another system. And yeah, the powerful thing here, when you define these, you get kind of a help as well for all the different variables you can use in the. We invested a lot in the new explore mode as well, kind of going deeper into the logs feature, adding support for streaming logs. So if I now switch to the explore view, I have actually live streaming Loki query here, and you can sort of see results coming in live here. That was kind of a really cool feature. We added, as well as let me jump back. I forgot to show you also that we added this kind of detailed view for the logs where you can see all the labels, quickly filter on the labels, and also look at fields that you have parsed out from the log line. We didn't want to explore and this logs story to be only focused on Loki, so we added support for InfluxDB as well, and Elasticsearch. And we'll kind of expand on this over time as well. So let's look at another thing, logs context. This is also a really cool feature. Now I'm switched to the light theme here, which if you have done a search, for example, here I've done a search through my logs, I can now open the context and see the surrounding log lines for this particular line. I can see the log lines preceding and coming after. and I can expand this log context. Anyway, I just wanted to show those cool features that we've added in Explore sort of last year in these minor releases. But we did a ton more. We improved all the cloud data sources, CloudWatch in particular, but the others as well. Added support for custom units and a news panel and much more. But throughout last year, we also did a lot of work, kind of foundational work for 7.0, working on this new data model and pipeline, working on streaming capability that we haven't yet kind of taken advantage of, and working on our new plugins platform through kind of focusing on reusable and easy to use components that will kind of speed up Grafana development and plugin development. So that leads us to 7.0 and some of the big things that we have added in 7.0, which I'm going to demo and talk about in detail here, is the new panel editor, which I'm going to start with. So why are we updating the panel edit UI in 7.0? We just kind of, if some of you at least might remember that we did update the panel edit UI in 6.0. We added, sort of made this big change, added these icon tabs on the side. The big thing here was to be able to switch between different visualizations from within the edit mode. But we struggled a lot with kind of coming up with this UI design, and we were never really happy where we ended up. So the icons, tabs on the side felt a bit kind of awkward. The panel settings like title were a bit hidden, and we also struggled with the panel settings, all the visualization settings, and the layout. We struggled finding a layout that felt easy to scan and didn't have a lot of dead space. So we had an idea to put the options on a sidebar pane, and we did a kind of quick proof of concept of this design that looked like this. This was just a kind of early proof of concept, and we tested this with user to get some feedback, and the initial kind of reception there was really positive. That this helped kind of put all the options in a single column, make them easy to scan, make them easier to be consistent between different panels, and also made it possible to have kind of more declarative options without kind of worrying about the complex layout on a wide screen. So yeah, there was a ton of cool things that gave us confidence that this was a right thing to pursue. We also wanted to do some sort of have some other big goals for this new panel edit UI to make the options more consistent across panel types. And we wanted to introduce new form components that also were easy to use, have descriptions, and so forth. And we wanted to expose the new data model features that we've been working on, specifically around data options and override rules that I'm going to talk a lot about. So let's take a look at this new edit mode. I'm just going to sign in. I remember my password, and so I've created this custom home dashboard here that is a good kind of jumping off point for all the things that I'm gonna demo. So let's start with the new panel editor. So when I'm as you can see here, we have this sidebar pane here that has things like panel title, description. I can collapse these sections in the sidebar pane here. Here's the panel type selector or visualization selector. And if I open the display tab, you can see all the display options here. And these both these tabs are kind of this side pane here, and the queries area here can be resized at will. You can also collapse this this options pane. If you only kind of want to focus on the queries, you can have the full area to use for that. So let's jump to a real visualization here and take a look at this in more detail here. to highlight some of the new options here, or new form styles. We have a new radio button design here that will make it a little bit easier to discover some of the options that are available, like the display mode here in the gauge panel, in the bar gauge panel. You can see sort of easily select these different options, and this option for show unfilled area, for example. Let's see here. The other thing that I want to cover here is the field and overrides tab. But so let's dig into that, and I'm gonna jump to slides in a sec as well to talk a little bit more about sort of this field and overrides tab and how they fit into what we're trying to do. I'm just gonna put back this like that. So the field settings, or the field tab, is about the data options and our new kind of standardized data options that are actually part of the data structure as well. And these the field tab are data options that govern all the series. You can think of them as defaults for all the different fields or series that we're showing here. So if I change this to 200, for example, you can see that all the different series here are impacted. So to give you some more context of what we're trying to do with the field options here is to make Grafana more consistent across different panels. We want to have the same UI for defining these data options and the override rules. So we want them to be the same in every panel. So I'll just jump to the slides here a quick second, and then I'll jump back to the demo to show you what I mean here. So in the graph panel before, we had this UI to select unit and min and max and decimals for the different y-axes. We had a different thresholds design and UI in the graph panel. And if you look at the single stat panel, we had a different option, so layout and UI for defining unit, decimals, thresholds, and min and max. So if we then go to overrides, we had the graph panel has a specific override UI that allows you to specify display options for particular series. And the table panel had a very similar concept around column styles that basically allowed you to do the same thing, to have display options per column. So what we've been trying to do in 7.0 is unify all this into a standardized model for data options and data override rules. And this data option model is actually part of the data structure. So all these options can actually be returned by the data source as well. So this data structure with options kind of flow through a pipeline where we apply the panel defaults, which is something you define in the field tab, and we apply the override rules, which you define in the overrides tab. So let's go back to Grafana here and take a look at the overrides tab. So this is the kind of unified concept where we're trying to provide a single concept for series override or column styles that will work for both time series and table data. So let's pick a series here. For example, I can pick the outhouse series and change the max value. And if I change this to 57, it should change to max. And if I change this to 10 or 1000, it will change to a very small value here. So you can see that this change only impacts this series. And I can change any property here. I can change the unit, or let's change this unit to % maybe. And I can see that this unit has changed here. The nice thing here, and I can specify custom thresholds as well, and data links for each of these series. So let's specify some custom thresholds here and make this go maybe red to yellow. And I can also do percentage-based thresholds in Grafana 7.0. This is quite new, not something you could do before. So this will make the thresholds kind of look at the min and max instead. Look at the so be relative to the min and max. I'm gonna stick to absolute thresholds here. And let's 200. So let's take a look at what happens when I switch panel now, or switch visualization to a gauge. So you can see that all the overrides are still being applied. I still have custom thresholds and unit for this particular series. And let's switch to a graph, and you can see that all these that I'm actually visualizing time series here. But what happens if I switch to table? So you can see that if I switch to table, I'm only visualizing one series here at a time, because all the time series are actually sort of different result sets with a different time field. But I can use a transform, which is something I'm gonna dig into in greater detail later. But I'll use it here to highlight this fact that if I do a join here and using a transform, I will combine all the time series into a single table. And if you look here at the outhouse series, you can see that it has this unit applied. So the override is still taking effect, even though I've transformed this data structure into a table. The override is still being applied. So the override system is can be transparently applied to time series data and table data. And if I were to specify a display option here, so the field level options and the overrides is not only for kind of these standard data options. You can also have table or panel specific options here. So if you look here, I now have column width, column alignment, and cell display mode as kind of data options. And I can now provide set these options using the overrides as well. So I could set the cell display mode here, for example, on the outhouse series here, and say I want this to be a colored background. Oh, that's a nasty. Let's change this. And I could then maybe try to do a gradient gauge instead. So there I can use an override system here to specify different cell display modes. And I could then, for example, set the column alignment. Maybe I want this to be use a centered column alignment. So that gives you a little bit sense of what we're trying to do here with field options, data options, and the override system. And part of the 7.0 is as well a new table panel with these new cell display modes and using this new data option model. So I can actually part of this demo is I want to show a little bit more of this table panel. Just quickly go through some of the cool options here. You have the colored background, you have the bar gauge cells, display mode here, and you have an LCD cell display mode here as well as a colored value mode, and it supports data links as well. Let's go back to the slides and talk a little bit more about this data model. So during last year, we worked on this new data structure that combines time series and table data. But the important thing is that the data structure that carries the data around is also has this data option model that includes min and max, thresholds, units, data links, and custom display options. So all of those can then be kind of defined directly by the data source using this pipeline, or set by panel options or override rules. And the goal here was really to make Grafana easier and more consistent and be more powerful to enable kind of more data-driven options and more dynamic options. And also a big theme here is kind of stop reinventing the wheel in every panel, so they can share the data option model, share an override rule system, and of course share the UI and help Grafana be more sort of easier to learn and master. So just a sour note here, or kind of is that we have some ways to go. Not all the panels in Grafana are currently using this new sort of panel architecture. So we still have some old panels to migrate to this new architecture. Some of you might know that Grafana started with AngularJS, an old dead sort of library, and we have been migrating to React this last couple of years, and we still have, we're pretty almost like 90% migrated now, but the graph panel is the kind of one of the last remaining pieces here. So if you look at the graph panel, it doesn't have this field and override tab, and it will have these old options that you kind of remember from previous versions. So and this old Cirrus override system. So this will be on our backlog for the coming minor releases to get this graph panel migrated to this new panel architecture as well. Okay, let's jump to transformations and talk a little bit about that. So before I start demoing transformations, I need to move my camera because otherwise I'm gonna cover the transformation editor UI. Yeah, transformation is really a new step that you can define, where you can define rules, transformation rules that modify your data before it's sent to the visualization. And so to show you some of the use cases here, I'm gonna go to this transformation dashboard and take a look at one of the sort of most straightforward use cases is when you want to customize the table, for example. So here we have a table panel and a table result set as well. And I just want to maybe change the order of these columns here. Maybe do rename a column, and I can use the organize fields here, which is kind of a combo transformation that allow you to maybe I want info to go first, and I want min and max and value. So I now have adjusted kind of the ordering here. I can also do renames here. So this is just kind of manipulating the data in a tiny way to fit the visualization I want. Change the order and rename, and I can also do hide here. Maybe I'm not interested in min and max, and I just want the value. So you can hide columns here. And this has been a top-rated feature request for the table panel in Grafana to be able to do this, to be able to change the order of columns, hide and rename. And now this is something you can easily do with a transformation, but it's also available to all panels and all visualization types. So this is the crucial thing with transformations, is that it allows us to reuse data manipulation between different data sources and different panels. So to highlight another thing that Grafana had in the old table panel, we had these transformations to transform time series into table structures. So before, this was a feature that was kind of built into the table panel, and hence couldn't be reused by other visualizations. So if I look at these time series here and switch to the table panel, we had different transformations to kind of transform this data into a table structure. But we want to so the goal here with transformations is to bring that out of the panels, or and we have transformations features that was part of the data sources as well, and we want to bring those out of the data sources and make them into a reusable concept that we can share across. Now we have this outer join transformation that will join all these time series together on the time field, and we can get a table showing you all the time series. Let's look at some other use cases here. Another use case, similar use case for just kind of this concept of transforming time series is in Prometheus. We had this format option, and some other data sources also had this format option to specify how the data should be returned, how time series should be returned. So this was basically a transformation feature that was built into the Prometheus data source to transform time series to table using the labels as fields. But this was not available to any other data source. It was just a custom feature in the Prometheus data source. Now this is available for every data source that is returning tags or labels through a transformation we call labels to fields. The labels to fields will then extract the labels and add them as fields, which will show up as columns in the table here. And so this feature, is available to every data source now, and it's not something built in custom for a specific data source. The other really popular kind of feature request for Grafana has been to be able to do simple math across queries. Not every data source supports doing simple arithmetic, adding or subtracting the values from different time series, and it's kind of creating a new time series from that result. And that's something you can now do using the calculate from field here. So you could kind of create a total time series based on some other time series here, and you can specify which one you want here, or you can create some other kind of calculation, maybe create a difference between two different time series. You can use the binary operation to really do some kind of scaling if you want to do a scaling, or subtract or add to different time series with each other. That's solves a really popular feature request for many data sources that lack the ability to do math on multiple query results. The other one that I didn't demo before was this kind of reducer that allows you to show the min and max, maybe last, first, and last of many time series in a table. So this is also some kind of transformation that existed as a built-in feature in the table panel, in the old table panel, but now is available as a transformation. So this way of kind of transforming time series can be used by every visualization. So I can now sort of pick another visualization here and show this data. Lastly, the last use case that I wanted to go over for transformations is around filtering. So and reusing the same query results. So a kind of hidden feature in Grafana is the fact that you can reuse the same query result in many different panels. So in this case, I have a panel here that returns 3 time series, and what I can do in Grafana is use the dashboard data source and pick this source data panel as my kind of source data. And so this will reuse the same query result, no new query is issued. And the cool thing is, using the filter by name transformation, I can now filter out a part of that data set that I want to visualize in a different way in this panel. So here I kind of isolate two different time series in their own graph. I am here picking the same data, but just joining it by time and showing it in a table. And in this panel below, I'm also using the exact same query result to visualize it, visualize the current state, the last state, using a gauge. So if I hover over the last values here, they should match. So 9 the first server, 88 on the sort of backend ops, and then 70 on the third one. So that matches the last values here. So, and all these panels use the result from the same query. So I'm super excited about kind of the what transformations means for Grafana in terms of opening up a whole host of new features that we couldn't really do before, or we didn't have a place to put them in that was maintainable and so could be reused across data sources and across panels. So that's why I'm really excited about that. Let's jump back to the slides and move on. Yeah, so this highlights the fact that I'm excited about moving features that were custom built for data sources or visualizations and move them into transformations that then can be reused for every data source and every. So a summary here for transformations. Yeah, it's about getting the data in a shape that is suitable for the visualization. Example there is kind of renaming, ordering, and hiding parts of the data. Transforming time series into different table structures and reducing the data in different ways. And doing simple calculations across query results. So that's some of the use cases here that we're looking at. Okay. 3 down, 2 to go. Let's take a look at the panel inspector. And let's go back to this jumping off home dashboard here and look at the panel. So this is also a feature that tries to unify and share more across different panel types in Grafana. Specifically around the feature of looking at the raw data, looking at the data behind the panel, and being able to download that data as CSV, for example. So this is not something you could do easily in Grafana before. Before you were kind of only the graph panel and the table panel had a CSV export feature, but there was no way to look at the data so directly from within Grafana. So, for example, if I look at this bar gauge here, what I can do now in this with this new panel inspector is look at the raw data. So this is just showing the exact same data that was shown in this bar gauge, but I can also here turn off the transformations and look at the sort of all the values that went into that bar gauge panel. And similarly here I have a time series data. I can open the inspect drawer here, and I can look at all these different time series and download them as a CSV file. There are some other tabs here, stats, show some query times. I can look at the JSON for the JSON model for the panel, and I can also open the query inspector, which is really there for troubleshooting query problems that you can identify here by looking at the raw HTTP request and response that Grafana is sending and receiving. There is more that we have kind of done in this panel inspector. So let's take a look at the stats feature, for example. The stats feature can actually include more information. It can include processing the information from the data source. So for Metric Tank or Grafana Cloud Graphite, you will get a lot more detail here that show you how expensive this query was, and kind of what the detail around exactly what went on in the time series backend when this query was being processed. So useful for troubleshooting and resolving performance issues. Another thing, and this is also, this can be implemented by any data source plugin, can return these stats that can be shown in the inspector. So Loki is also returning these stats. Lots of detail here around kind of exactly how much data that was being queried to process this logs query. There is one more cool thing in the inspect drawer, and that is that a data source can implement a custom view, a custom metadata visualization to help a user identify sort of exactly how the query was being sort of processed and rolled up. So for Grafana Cloud Graphite, they will get this kind of info icon to show you that data is runtime consolidated and show you exactly what consolidation function was used. So a very important part when kind of using Grafana for time series is really understanding and interpreting the data correctly. And for that, you might it's important to understand how the data was being aggregated. So what function was used in aggregating the data, either during the query time or if it's rolled up data. That's also super relevant to know exactly how that process was done. And this is something that you can now do in Grafana Cloud Graphite. So I can see here that data is rolled up using a 30-minute average function. So if I click there, I open the panel inspector into this custom metadata tab that highlights exactly kind of the roll-up configuration and also shows you all the steps that the query went through and all the different aggregation functions that was involved in getting the result you're seeing. So yeah, super important to be able to really interpret the data correctly. That was pretty much it as it comes to the inspect panel. This is a panel now that works on every panel, both new and old. Will get the ability to look at the underlying data and download it as a CSV, as well as look at these stats. So let's jump back to the slides, and I'm gonna move back my camera and continue to the final topic, and that's tracing. So many, I think, are familiar with the fact that kind of Grafana started with a very heavy focus on time series and time series data. So we were a lot about metrics and exposing the power of time series databases. But over time, we have kind of expanded beyond that with sort of additions of Elasticsearch and other data sources like SQL data sources. And last year with Grafana 6.0, we really went deep into logs as well with this custom logs viewer in Explore, and as well as the workflow of navigating between your metrics and your logs. But there was a big missing kind of story there, or missing workflow in being able to view trace data right from within Grafana. That's why it's super exciting to announce that we have completed this story and this workflow in 7.0 with full support for trace data and the workflow of kind of discovering traces and viewing them right from within Grafana. So let's take a look at that. Wrong link. Let's go to Explore and look at a logs query. I'm going to use Loki for this demo. And I want to search for a trace ID because I want to look at some trace data. But I forgot how to write this query, or I remember I've done this query before. So I'm going to sneak in another demo here that is a super cool Explore feature that is also available now in 7.0, and that's the query history in Explore, which allows you to kind of look at past queries you've done, and you can sort of filter it. I remember doing this query a couple of days ago, maybe 4 days ago, and using this filter, you can really discover exactly the query that you have issued before in Explore. And you can also look at your favorite queries and just kind of run them. And here I see I have actually stored this trace ID query. And let me run that and collapse this query history tab. So now I have my Loki query searching for a trace ID. And I've found a bunch of log lines here that contains this trace ID. And let's expand this, and I'll see that sort of we have a parsed field here with a trace ID and some buttons here that I can actually click on. And when I click on that, it will open the trace UI in this separate pane. And here I have the full trace UI where I can sort of click and expand all these kind of spans here and look at the detail for this complete kind of trace. And we're using using the Jaeger UI components here. So a big thanks and shout out to the Jaeger project for allowing us to do this. It's really nice to be able to sort of collaborate with another open source project like this. And yeah, excited to be able to have this workflow right from within the Grafana UI. So we support more than Jaeger. We support Zipkin as well. So you can set up this workflow if you're using Zipkin as well. And the way this works, at least this kind of workflow of being able to navigate from your Loki logs to a trace, is if you go to your data source settings, or in Loki in this case, you can define these kind of parsed out derived fields, and this allows you to identify a trace ID in your log and then map that to a Jaeger data source in Grafana. And that's kind of all you have to do to get this workflow working. So that is pretty much it for the big demos that I was planning to do. I think I have time to sneak in one more demo, but and this is for the auto grid mode. It's just a small feature that started as a hack day project from one person on the team, and it's just a more efficient way to lay out stat panels and gauges where Grafana kind of tries to optimize the space used. And this is completely automatic if you use the auto layout in these panels, which allows you to. So Grafana will try to figure out the best possible layout for all the panels, and it's pretty cool. Yeah, that was a sneak bonus demo. I didn't think I would have time for it, and I did sneak in a demo on query history when I did that tracing demo. So let's jump back to some finishing slides. Let's take a look at sort of some more things in Grafana 7.0. I have this demo and this talk hasn't been sort of covering everything that we've done. There's a lot more to sort of show and demo and talk about in the coming weeks. So one big thing that I didn't demo here is full support for CloudWatch logs in the Explore view. So if you're a CloudWatch user, that's pretty nice to be able to search and look at your logs right from Grafana. There's also a really exciting couple of features in Grafana 7.0 Enterprise, and I'm really excited about what the team there has been able to accomplish in this release. I didn't want to focus on these in this talk, as I wanted it to be mainly focused on the open source side of things. But Grafana Enterprise 7.0 has some cool features in enhanced search, allows you to identify popular and unused dashboards, as well as dashboard usage stats to understand kind of how a dashboard is being used, as well as being able to sort of see the presence of another user looking at the same dashboard as you are, and ton of improvements to data sources and reporting, and yeah, we'll cover this in separate blog posts and videos in the coming weeks. I also wanted to just kind of highlight the fact that we're investing a lot in making Grafana a really amazing platform to build solutions on top of. I'm excited about sort of what Grafana Labs will do and build on, and all the tools we're also giving customers and the community to build cool solutions on top of Grafana, using the component libraries and the documentation that we have published. So yes, to demo that quick, we have this this component site that where you can sort of look at all the different components that are in Grafana. Even the visualizations are here, so you can look at the bar gauge and get information on how to use this in your own kind of Grafana panel or application. So we're investing a lot in that. We're also doing the same for backend plugins. We're coming up with a completely new kind of way to develop backend plugins, or a new SDK that will help authors get going there and share much more between different plugins, as well as investing a lot in the documentation and tutorials. So on that, so we're revamping the documentation as well, trying to simplify the structure of the Grafana documentation and update them, as well as we have launched this new solutions-based tutorial site where we will cover kind of problems, sort of get users familiar with solving real problems in Grafana, as well as guides and tutorials for how to develop plugins yourself. So take a look at that if you're interested. Let's move on to some announcements. I have two announcements, starting with Grafana governance. This is something that we're releasing today, and this is basically making our internal process more open and transparent. We're gonna have a public mailing list for development, and we just want to be more open and transparent with how decisions are being made, and let the community be more a part of what goes on when we develop Grafana. So another thing I want to cover here is the fact that Grafana 7.0 is released today, and the stable is available. I think published just a few minutes or maybe an hour or so before this talk. So it's available. You can download it right now. And I just want to end with a big cheers and thanks to the Grafana team for working so hard on this release, and to the Grafana community for being so awesome all these years, giving us incredible kind of love and appreciation for the project, and as well as kind of helping with the project in different forms. So cheers and thanks.